And here we go again. It's another episode of Swing Thoughts. Having just completed 8 years, you'd think by now you and I would just be like, we'd have it down. But you know what? Every show is different. We don't know what's going to happen. It's a lot like a golf game.
Just see what shows up.
Exactly. I wonder if people who listen to us have, because this first part's always awkward. this first part's always like, I wonder if people who listen to us think, do they script that? The answer is no. Like, I never tell Tim what we're going to talk about at the beginning of the program. I just sometimes I just throw things at you because I'm like, I wonder what Tim would say.
I feel like it's most of the betting games. I just feel like at the end, tell me what I owe.
No, exactly. As always, there's Coach Tim. I'm golf spiritual leader. That's right. I decided to call myself that years ago. Somebody saw that on my bag the other day, and they made some noise like, oh, you're golf spiritual leader? I said, it's a joke. I was being ironic. And
did he expect you to be on like a cloud and then saffron robes?
Yeah. I said, I'm sorry I hadn't shaved my head yet. But it's coming. It's on its way. Welcome to the fall season. We, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, we kind of closed out our doing the show every week schedule, and we will be on on our fall into winter schedule starting today. But that doesn't mean that we're going to stop trying to provide excellent information. Wait till you guys hear who we have on the show today, which we will get to in a second. First, let me tell you that this program is, as always, brought to you by Taylormade Golf Canada, taylormadegolf.ca. Another great year of having them support us. Thank you very much. Who is OscarBravo.com? The reason that Tim and I aren't wearing our polos right now is because we're old and it just got cold today. And by the way, if you're watching this, neither of us, I didn't tell you I was going to wear a hoodie. As soon as I saw you, I'm like, oh, that's right. We're 130 years old, and that's why we're wearing hoodies today. Are you playing today, by the way?
Teaching today. Yeah, I'm going to be on a range up on the highest point at Blue Springs, where
Yes.
I'll be exposed to wind and be wearing probably 3 layers and long pants.
Because that's what I was going to say. I'm playing today, and I'm wearing long pants for the first time. So thank you very much to TaylorMade Golf, who is OscarBravo.com, and as always, StretchLab Toronto. If you've been listening to the show for any length of time, you know that we have mentioned our guest before. Most recently in a conversation we had with Carl Morris, who's been on our program many times. But years ago, and I was talking about this with you before the show. I can't remember when it was, but season 2 or 3, I mentioned I'd read this book, Golf from Point A, and how much I enjoyed it and how it resonated. And you were aware of the book. And then when we had Carl on, I had just finished listening to this person with Carl, and I said, you know what, she'd be great with us. And so thanks to a bunch of work in the background, and we're pleased to present Susie Meyers, not only an author, but one of the most engaging speakers on the subject of golf. I could tell you all about how she was most recently honored with being chosen as Golf Magazine's top 100 teachers in the country of the US of A. And for many years, a fine golfer and a golf instructor and a deep thinker about the game of golf. It's a pleasure to welcome Susie to our program. Hi, Susie.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me on. I'm super excited to talk golf with you too.
There's so much. I mean, I heard you with Carl, and I said to Tim after, I said, oh my God, Susie would be so great with us. Part of it is because you're obviously, again, a deep thinker about the game, but your enthusiasm for golf, your enthusiasm for the game of golf is really one of your superpowers.
Well, we carry that power within us, right? And I have no idea that that's a power. I just am who I am. And I do my best to be at point A, which is presenting the best of yourself in each and every moment. So if my enthusiasm comes out, it's only because I love this game and I really love self-improvement. I love to get the best out of myself. And as a player, that's what I was doing. I was trying to get the best out of myself every day when I was playing for a living. And when I decided to stop playing, I got a job up for the summer teaching. And I thought, as a player, those who play don't really want to teach. So I gave my first lesson though, and I came in and I said, oh my gosh, I've found what I want to do for the rest of my life. And my passion went from playing to helping others play to their best. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey for me.
So along that journey, there's often a point where people come and what may have worked for them doesn't work anymore, or they find a different way. Did you find along for you that there was a different path that you took that you thought was different than what you'd done before?
Well, it was interesting because when I became a teacher, it was back in the days when everything was very technical and video was big and analyzing was very big. And I got involved in that. I was back in the Northeast, and Mike Hebron was a mentor of mine, or is a mentor of mine. And he was a deep diver into the golf swing. And I thought, well, that's the way you needed to be as a coach. And then I realized that as a player, I never went that route. And so I was like, I'm starting to teach not the way that I learned how to play and not the way that I did play. And I ended up coming out to Arizona, and I met a gentleman that talked to me about how to think about golf. And every time he started to talk about how to think, I was like, well, that's the way I think. That's the way I think. And he looked at me and he goes, well, nobody thinks like that. He said, you have to teach people how to think like that. And I said, well, that's the way I thought. Just, don't think about the last shot. Just keep moving forward, because you never know where the ball's going to go. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was like 15 or 16, I was playing with a young professional, and I was on the 14th hole of my home course, and I had just hit it out of the trees up by the green. And he goes, God, if I hit it like you, I'd quit. And I looked at him like, oh my gosh, I'm right next to the hole. I got a 20-footer just off the green. I might make this thing. And I never thought about how it had to be perfect. I was just playing golf, and it just moved the ball forward. And that tenacity and that determination and that not focusing on perfection really was who I am.
Susie, we had the good fortune of having Michael Hebron on a couple times, and just really, it's interesting because there was a guy that, was a technical teacher who discovered a different way, a different path forward. But it seems to me that from reading about you and reading the book, that was always innate in you. But you must know this. It's not innate in a lot of the people that play this game.
Well, it is not innate, but it's because the golf culture has presented a kind of a different way to think, this technical side and the perfection side, and you have to get it right side. And when I got into how to think and started to verbalize it to people, they caught on to it. And Golf from Point A has allowed me to kind of package these ideas in a way that I believe people can digest them and actually use them. It was always said, play golf one shot at a time. I had no idea what that meant and how to actually do that. Of course, you're only going to hit one shot at a time. I can only hit this putt right now, but we didn't realize how much baggage everyone was carrying from the past and from the anxiety of the future, that they weren't really hitting just that one shot. They were carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders for that shot. So being able to help people understand what that actually is, playing golf from one shot at a time. Playing golf at Point A is really very active. It's not passive. At Point A, there is a lot to actually do that's so simple that you can do it, you just don't do it all of the time. And what do I mean by that? Playing golf from Point A is that when you're at at A, the point A, just like the alphabet, there's nothing before the letter A. So there is no past. You're at point A there. You don't care how the ball got here. You don't care if you're on the first tee. You don't care if this is the last putt of the day. There's nothing that has come before that. And you give your absolute best to what you're doing in the moment. And the best is taking in that information and making a good decision and creating a picture of what you want to do, committing to that picture, and then making a motion to the picture that you have in your head, and allowing all of that to happen, and then allow the ball to go and not try to steer it or hold on to it or make it do something. So it's actually very active at point A. And then wherever the ball goes, wherever it goes, because you cannot control where the ball goes, you simply walk to it and start over again at point A. And so by packaging it as I'm just here at point A, people understand what that means now, and they can define it in ways that are pertinent to them. So everything has to be very personal and relating to what their past experiences are. I know that when Jitanagara was leading, she was the #1 player in the world. She had to smile before every shot. Mm-hmm. And so for her, she went through the same routine, but every shot she smiled so that she would gain her inner power. And everybody has inner power. We just have to realize that we tend as humans to stifle that inner power by putting too many shoulds on ourselves. So one of my students said, I'm going to write a t-shirt that says, don't should on yourself. And I just thought that was absolutely brilliant, because that's a word that you just don't want to have in your vocabulary.
So Susie, if I may interject, one of the things you're talking about, and again, I had just breezed through the book again this morning, just because I thought, there's a couple things I wanted to remember. What you're talking about, starting over golf from point A, and as you say, it's a very active process. But it's the opposite of what most golfers do. As you say, most golfers connect the dots. Yes. They look at a golf hole as a series of shots that they should be able to play. If it's a par 4, they're thinking about where they want their tee shot, etc. Just talk a little bit about why connecting the dots doesn't work for golfers, and then bring us back around to how that relates to being in the present as often as you can.
So I think people believe that they can control the outcome. And so the first questions I ask a student is, can you control your golf swing? And most of them will say, yeah, that's why I practice. Well, so can you control where your ball goes? Well, I should be able to control where my ball goes. Well, then can you control your score? Well, no, I can't control that. Well, if you could control your golf swing, then you would know where your ball was going to go. And if you knew where your ball was going to go, you'd know what your score is. Well, and then they understand that that doesn't make any sense. So helping people understand that their golf stroke is the one thing that they cannot control, and where the ball goes is not controllable. They think that the pros, when they watch them on TV, that those guys are shooting like sniper guns, and they just look at the flag and the ball is just going to go zoop right at the flag. They don't realize that this player is really shooting a shotgun, and it goes out in this diversified pattern, and it goes out in a distribution that they don't know where it's going to end up. When they're playing well, it does what they think it's going to do. When they're not playing well, it could go anywhere. And that's because of the mental side of the game. When they're not playing well, they have doubt, confusion, or fear going on. And all of that affects the mind to body intricate connection that makes a golf stroke. So what we want to realize is what we can control and what we can't control. Well, if we can't control our golf swing and we can't control where the ball goes, what can we control? Well, we can control our preparation. Some people say, well, we can control our attitude. And I'm going to say, well, we would like to think that we can, but how many people lose it on the golf course? How many people are depressed on the golf course? How many people are frustrated on the golf course? If it's so easy to control that, then we probably would. But people don't understand that that's part of the I don't know, it's just kind of the fun part. How am I going to play today? Well, nobody knows how they're going to play today, but they can make a decision on who they're going to be as they play today.
Yeah,
And if you decide who you're going to be, I'm going to play golf from point A. And all day long, I'm just going to say, oh, I'm at point A. It's a brand new beginning. I have this process. I understand what the process is. That's all I'm going to do. I have no idea where the ball's going to go. I'm just going to allow the ball to go wherever it goes. I'm going to accept it. I'm going to move on. So I have 3 A words in the point A, because point A has P words and it has A words. And the A words are first to have awareness. And awareness is the key really to life. Am I aware that the wind's blowing in my face and I need more club? Am I aware that I'm uphill? Am I aware that I'm feeling a little bit nervous about this shot? Am I feeling confused? Am I aware of who I'm being right now? Everything is based on awareness in order to apply I call it a tool in quotations, that you need. So if I'm feeling nervous about it, the best way to get yourself back into a state of being is by breath. Wim Hof has become a big name in the world, Wim Hof breathing. But breathing is basically just getting oxygen into your body to calm your brain. I didn't realize until I did a bunch of research that when you breathe through your nose, there's an enzyme that is released that actually calms your brain. And I'm like, so just breathe, deep breaths, get yourself back into the state of being that you want to be in, and now go through your process. And please do not connect your dots, because if you're connecting your dots, you're thinking about the results. And we could give you example after example after example of professionals that have a putt to win on the last hole, and they go, oh, if I make this, I'm going to win. And everything in their body changes. And that's just because of the way the mind works. So you have to stay at point A, allow the ball to go. It's either going to go in the hole, it's going to go right of the hole, it's going to go left of the hole, it's going to be short of the hole. And then you look at it and you move on to the next point A.
So that's where I'm going to interject is that's the way the mind works. The mind goes all over the place.
Yes.
You know, I concur with you 100%. We can't control the mind. We can't control the thoughts that are going to come in, but we can certainly respond. And so I think that what you're talking about in many ways is making a commitment to a process and not deviating from that, because that's part of what happens in the game. That's part of being human. The brain responds to novelty. And, you know, we see all these options for us, and we could go back. Oh, I remember what I did 5 years ago when I was pushing the ball or when I was leaving putts short. So talk to us a little bit about, and maybe this is what we're learning, those other 2 A's you were talking about.
Yes.
Is what do you suggest in terms for golfers in terms of staying committed to whatever it is, including point A?
Well, you first have to have a plan when you go out, and your plan has to be to play golf from point A, which is have no past, have no future, have a process that creates a picture that's always positive. So if you don't go out with a plan, you're not anchored into something. Now, there are a million plans out there. And like I said, each person has to decide what they need for that day. So my next A word is accept. And accept what you cannot control, accept what you cannot change. Wherever your ball is, it's there. You can't change it. There's nothing you can do about it. So accept it and move on. But what we tend to do is we tend to hold on to it. We mourn it. We try to fix it. We try to figure it out. We try to make the next one better because I just messed this one up. So I need to make up for my next shot. So all of that is baggage. So when we realize that I just have to accept where it is, start over, free myself of all of that bondage from the past and the anxiety of the future, then I'm able to bring out the best of myself where I am. And then the next A word is the opposite of trying. So many of us in golf are trying so hard to do so much that the harder you try in golf, the worse it gets. We know that the players that are the most relaxed, the most having fun, the most focused in the moment, not worrying about anything, are the ones that play well. But how do you get there? You really have to go through some training, and getting into the state of allowing is just another way of training yourself all day long. Okay, I use the word all day long. I'm going to allow myself to see the picture. I'm going to allow the ball to go. I'm going to allow myself to hold the finish. I'm going to allow myself to be at point A. And I just keep using that word because it's such a powerful word about not controlling things, just allowing things to flow. And so I package those into 3 so that people can remember them: allow, accept, and awareness. And if you go out and say, okay, I'm going to pick one of those words, and that's all I'm going to work on all day long, and that's what I'm going to focus on, the task is so simple that I can do that. I just forget to do it. I get caught up in all of the rest of the stuff. So being able to be aware where your mind is allows you to come back to the anchor, or to the point that you have decided you're going to be all day.
And just before you come back in, I just want to say the golf mind is so weird when you consider that there's things that we have to do to mourn it, and we're often caught in bondage.
I love that. I love that phrase, because we do. I mean, as golfers, we're in some kind of grieving at times for something that has already happened. But back to the 3 A's, and I want to talk a little bit about what prevents golfers from doing that, because we've all had moments when it all seems to be flowing and we're aware, we allow, and we accept. But one of the things I wrote down, and this comes from a friend of ours, a guy that I got to know this summer, Dr. Raymond Pryor. And Ray's point is that one of the things that interrupts allowing, accepting, and awareness, especially over the golf ball, is the idea of a golfer's self-image wrapped up in the outcome of every shot. That there's too much of self attached to a simple golf stroke, whether it's a short putt or a chip or a drive they don't like. What are your thoughts about that? About golfers have this vision of themselves, and maybe if they don't execute it perfectly, they won't recognize themselves, and maybe they're not as good as they thought they were.
Well, golf makes a human being be very vulnerable, and people do not like that feeling. So as I coach ladies who are trying to play with other ladies, they think that their whole self is about their golf score, and they're like only worried about the results. So we could talk about tour players, we can talk about the average person. We all have this idea that we are going to be portrayed as our golf game. And once we realize that every single person that plays golf is extremely vulnerable when they set up. And it was so amazing. I got to caddy for a young man in the US Open the year that Tiger Woods won at Torrey Pines. And he was the low amateur. And it was so interesting, that first tee box. It was as if, and I've played in a few US Opens, so I know this feeling that you're standing on the tee box completely naked, and you have to make a golf stroke and allow the ball to go. And you have to be that vulnerable and allow that to happen. Now, people don't like that, and that's that ego part of it. But once we realize that that's the only way to play golf, is to lose control, is how we gain control. And that this one golf shot is not going to be defining who you are. And it's easy to say that, but once you start talking to people and saying, everybody misses. This young man, he was the low amateur, but he hates hitting hooks, and he had 4 first tee shots, and 2 of them were hooks into the left rough. And the difference between him being low amateur and him just teeing it up and missing the cut was that he didn't care that they went there. He just went and played them. And that's the big difference. When we care where the ball goes, and we care how we missed it, and then we have to put all our clothes on, and we have to protect ourselves, and our changes are mind to muscle intricate connections. This is why people play better on the range, because once they let the ball go, they don't really care. Nobody's watching them. There's no scorecard, and they feel very free on the golf course. So I talk about being the same person wherever you are. When I was working with this young player, I was like, you have to be the same person on the practice tee, on the first tee, on the last tee, in a qualifying round, in the last group on the last day. That's what you're really training, is being the same person, having the same routine, having the same vulnerability, and allowing yourself to get hurt by this game. But that's the only way to excel through it, is to be vulnerable. And I just find it fascinating that we define ourselves through this game.
100%. And quickly, let me say before you jump back in, Timmy, that's kind of the whole point of, getting past all this is to be comfortable, and not just with being uncomfortable, because that's kind of trite, but to be comfortable with the possibility of failure is the only way to actually get to a chance at success. Because if you're not comfortable with it, could go anywhere and just let it rip, you're just going to guide and steer and jab the golf ball all around, and you'll never know if it was your technique or your temperament that's interrupting your ability.
That is so correct. And so in the book, I talk about every shot is a surprise. And it totally is a surprise. When those pros hit it right next to the hole, it's just as much a surprise to them. They don't look like it's a surprise, and we, the viewers, don't think it's a surprise, but they're like, oh yeah, baby, I'm right next to the hole. Every shot is a surprise. And that's what I say to myself after every shot. Surprise. It's either a pleasant surprise or an unpleasant surprise, but that's how vulnerable we want to make ourselves. So surprise is a great word to go out and just say, wherever you go, it's going to be a surprise, but I can handle you. I can handle where the ball is. Wherever you go, I'm going to go back to the same process. I'm going to do the very best I can with what I have right where I am. And that's the motto of Point A. It doesn't matter what your score is. It only matters did you give your best on every shot.
Well, one of the things I love about your approach to the game and your book is that you filter it through your own experience. Like you were saying, earlier in the podcast, is that the way you were teaching was not the way that you connected with the game. And I love the way that you've managed to come up, and you could use the word package just from Point A. But what I also like about is how you've come up with this interesting phrase, the marvelous you. And I'd love you just to talk a little bit about that, because that's something that Howard and I have talked about for 8 years of doing this show, is that rather than taking on all these techniques from all these external sources, whether it be YouTube or wherever, you have some innate talent. So I'd just like you to elaborate on what you mean by the marvelous you, and why that's something that our listeners should perhaps investigate.
Well, the marvelous you is in every single one of us. And I just believe that we do have innate abilities to toss a paper wad into the garbage can. We are designed for success. And the reason that we don't have success is because of the stuff that's on top of us, the garbage. And our job is
ego mind, you mean? Do you mean the ego mind or the culture we're in, or what do you mean the garbage?
It doesn't even matter. It's just a thought, I should make this putt is baggage on top of you. It's not even, I don't call it the ego mind, because every single person that goes out to play golf wants to play well. That's human. So human, I don't know. I don't talk too much about the ego. I just talk about being human. And if we just allow ourselves to get rid of the stuff that holds us back and keep ourselves clean, and that's what I talk about, is if we were to build a statue of the golfer, would we rather put things together to make that statue, or would we rather have a piece of marble and chip away and find that golfer within that marble. And I believe it's the chipping away that creates that golfer. And my whole life is to keep myself clean of the garbage that can be put upon that statue. And so I actually protect myself. The YouTube and the information that is out there today is all good information. These guys are not putting it out there to hurt anyone. But if you don't protect yourself, then you are susceptible to way too many ideas. That's not how the brain works. The brain works in having a clear picture with nothing interfering with it, and then just moving to that picture. And so as I've grown in my own growing of golf, I haven't watched YouTube for golf. I don't listen to other sports psychologists. I don't do that because now I would be clogged up with too much information. You have to keep it so simple, and you actually have to protect yourself. My coach told me when I was back developing my game, he says, if you read any books, if you read magazines, if you listen to anybody else, I'm not going to coach you, because the whole idea is to make your mind so quiet that you just simply move according to the picture, and you've developed movements and you've developed a quiet mind. But you are the keeper of you, and it's your responsibility to keep yourself pure and clean from all the garbage. And it's not that it's bad stuff. It's just that that's not the way the brain works. The brain does not multitask. The brain gets confused quite easily. So you have to make it so clear and so simple that you can actually do it. I was reading something about Jordan Spieth a while ago when he was putting the way he putted when he was playing so great. And he said the whole key was that I simply blacked out. And we talk about that, but he says it takes work and it takes preparation to really give it no thought. And yes, we train our physical stuff. Yes, you have to have a good golf stroke. Yes, you have to train seeing the ball go in the hole with your putting stroke. But when you're playing, if you're thinking in the conscious mind, you've slowed everything down. And if the ego gets involved, you are out there trying to protect yourself, which no one plays very well that way. We need to allow ourselves to be vulnerable.
Susie Meyers, before we say goodbye, I think what you hit on in Golf from Point A, and if you want to know more about Susie, it's SusieMeyersGolf.com. But I think great players have always thought this way. Jack Nicklaus or Bobby Jones. I had a chance years ago, I was hosting an event, and Nick Price was one of the players. It was the Skins game, Tim. And I was driving Nick back to his car. I happened to be in a cart, and I said, Nick, hey, nice to meet you. And I said, do you mind if I ask you a question? And at the time, I was, a decent player. And I said, my issue is when I get it going really well, I can't, if I get under par, whatever really well is for anybody, I said, I can never really hold it together. I start to get nervous or whatever. And I said, how do you do it when you get it really going? You're 4 or 5 under after 6 or 7 holes. And here's what he said. He said, I pretend I'm starting again. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I pretend every hole is the first hole. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, on the first hole, you're not over par, you're not under par, you're just starting. He said, that's how I think. He said, that's how I think all the time, but especially when I start to play really, really well. But I would say as a caveat, that's also a great way to think full time, but also when you're playing, when you think you're not playing well, because it gives you a chance to kind of etch-a-sketch the round and start again.
That's so powerful. And that's obviously golf from point A. My goal is to get point A to be a universal word so that people can use it as a tool, that they understand what Nick Faldo was saying there, what they understand when those players are winning the US Open, they're overcoming all this extraneous thought. They're just getting back to point A. They're getting back to, there is nothing in the past. There is nothing in the future. I'm just doing the best I can do with what I have right now. And when that becomes a universal word, I think people will enjoy their experience so much more, because it's really about the experience of playing out there for 4.5 hours. Who am I going to be? I'm going to be a player at point A. I'm going to allow the ball to go. I'm going to accept wherever it goes. And I'm going to be aware of where my thoughts are. And I'm going to enjoy the round rather than trying to force everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things I love where you're going with that, and one of the things I love about the phrase point A is that it's another way of articulating what being present is. There isn't a future, there isn't a past, and you're not caught in a story. Because really, all we're doing when we're playing golf is creating a story that I'm under par. I mean, really, what's that actually really mean? You know, to quote, here's the first reference to Fred Shoemaker today, is really, we're just hitting a piece of rubber in a park. Everything else is just a story and adding meaning to it. So what I love about what you're putting across with point A is that just let go of, as you say, the garbage. Let's be here now. Let's enjoy what we've got. So, Susie, it's been just a treat to meet you and talk to you about your book. And I would say that for our listeners, that's one that you should definitely have in your library.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Susie. We appreciate it. Golf from Point A is the name of the book, and more about Susie Meyers at susiemeyers.com. All the best to you.
Thank you, too. I certainly enjoyed it, and I love listening to your podcasts and your work. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Susie
thank
Meyers,
you.
a very nice person.
I put the jump in my step. There you go.
That's right. I appreciate you, Susie. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, this is the point where you just let yourself go.
I'd say goodbye.
You say goodbye, you're done now. Yeah?
Okay.
See you later.
Bye.
You know, it's funny, no matter how many times I tell guests that there's going to be a point where Tim and I are going to say goodbye and it's going to be a little awkward. And then, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
No,
It doesn't matter.
absolutely.
Yeah, Golf from Point A. It's a small book. Here it is. Look at it. It's very thin. You know?
Here's the fun part.
Yeah, there we go.
I remember our friend George McNamara coming on the show, and or maybe it was just in a conversation with me, our late friend George McNamara, saying he was on vacation, but as a golf professional, there was a book that he couldn't avoid reading, and it was Golf from Point A, and a wonderful book. And it's funny, this morning in my little Golf Digest summary today, there was something about Tiger Woods, and he's giving a clinic or something like that, and the guy's got the video going. It says, "So Tiger, what would you recommend to any amateur about getting better?" And he just went, Tiger was, "Don't watch fucking YouTube."
That's right. Yeah. Here's how you know the golf world is desperate for any Tiger Woods sighting. He wasn't even hitting balls at that clinic. It was Ricky Fowler and Will Zalatoris, and Tiger was just kind of hitting a couple chips and bouncing a ball in his wedge, and they let it go for 20 minutes, hoping that he would take a swing. You know what? One thing I want to talk about, which in terms of, you know, what we're all getting to or trying to get to is this notion, and again, I know this is the summer of Ray, but the idea of, well, it starts with, you know, people saying, I want to be more consistent. Well, that's not true. You can't be. I want to hit the ball. What if I could hit the ball good all the time? Well, you can't. So all you can control, and I know we've said this 1,000 different ways, but the way he talks about it is this idea of stable confidence. And what is stable confidence versus, you know, unstable? And one of the things she said about the fragility of golfers, the vulnerability.
Yep.
What a great way to put it, because we're literally standing over a shot, whether it's the first hole of a tournament or you're just playing with your buddies. While we're in the motion, we're pretty vulnerable because that thing could go anywhere, even at the highest level. You know, I always reference that Ian Poulter was in contention a few years ago, and he shanked a shot deep in the back nine, like one of the best players on earth. So the idea of stable confidence and what it is the notion that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. And once you can accept that, I'm going to be fine, come what may, it actually opens you up to hitting better shots because you're not trying to guide it, hoping to control an outcome, as she said, as you've said, as we all, that is uncontrollable.
Right.
But it's the act of trying to control it that gives us the anxiety. Thoughts, comments, and concerns.
I feel like lately you're sort of directing me. Now's the time for you to talk, Tim.
No, you know what it is? After we have like a real guest, I just like to bring back some of the nonsense, you know.
Yeah, exactly. No,
some
I
nonsense.
think actually what you're doing is pretending you're a PGA Tour player and you've just come in and you're in contention and you've gone through your birdies and bogeys.
That's all right.
Now I'm ready to take questions.
Do we have any questions for Howard after his round?
Well, yeah, I really resonated with what she said about golf makes you vulnerable. And you think about how in so many ways that's counterintuitive for so many people. She talked about those women she's coaching who it's all about their score and how they're going to look. I mean, that's really no different than so many people. They want to control how they look. They want to look good. They want to look like they're competent. Whatever they do, they're good, because if they don't perform at this to what they believe is the expectation or a standard that they've set for themselves, then they're going to fail and look bad. And really, you think about when we do operate with some vulnerability, that's when we really tap into our special, I guess you could say, our marvelous you, to the authentic you. Like when you in your email to me the other day, you said you did stand up for the first time in a while.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're up there, you're vulnerable. Yeah, you've worked on some jokes and you've got sort of maybe an arc, if you will, that you're following. But I would have to say you also are just sort of allowing things to happen that come to you and going with it rather than rigidly trying to control it.
I mean, stand-up is a great example of the most vulnerable you can be is public speaking. And the most vulnerable public speaking I would offer is stand-up comedy, only because it's such a specific outcome. You're looking for such a specific reaction. And that being laughter, it's not an easy thing to do, getting people to laugh. But, I went up there and it was one of those things where, not that it was easy, but it was easier. It was a beautiful theater. People are sitting down. There was hundreds of them, 300 plus people. The microphone was perfect. There was a spotlight. So it was kind of like, I would put it like in golf terms, a downhill, it was like a wind behind you, downhill par 5. Not too long. Like, you're the worst you're going to do is make par maybe. So I knew walking onto that stage, and I had a pretty good, all things were in my favor. Like, the opposite of that is lights are on, there's no stage, you're yelling at people. But there's a high level of acceptance needed to do it. The idea that, hey, this could go wrong. Even though it's a short par 5 downwind, it could still go awry. By the way, speaking of that email, I want to talk about the email I wrote you, but I want to talk. Are you okay if we talk about what you wrote me?
Sure.
Because I thought it was a pretty interesting note.
Okay. I don't remember what I wrote, so
You said, I have a new client who's an 8.
Oh, yes.
I think this is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Tim's note to me is, I have a new client who's an 8 index, and his goal is to get to 4 next season and to 2 this season after that. And I think this is also part of something for one of your Substacks. And you said, I invite you to be brief. I don't want you to make this into a project, which I thought was very sweet. So I wrote down things very quickly. I went, okay. My first response was, tell him to quit his job. I said, just quit your job and dedicate yourself to golf, as I have. So I said 8 to 4, from 8 handicap to 4. Strategy, short game, especially less 3-putting, and flexibility, meaning get more flexible. Do something TPI, Brooke Benny, yoga, something. And I said, from 4 handicap to 2, speed. Because I said, if you want to get close to scratch, the scratch average for yardage off the tee is 250 yards. Now, doesn't mean you can't get there without that number, but you better be getting close to it because you're not going to do it at 215 to 20 off the tee. Better short game and continued better fitness. And I saw, and then from 2 to 0, I don't know. That one's tough. But I think an 8 handicap could get to 2. Well, it certainly could get to 4, but from 4 to 2 is also a pretty tall order. Well, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that getting from an 8 to a 2 for most people who still have to work.
Yes.
It's about a 2-year process. And the hardest part is from the 4 to the 2.
Oh, yeah.
Because what I really think is that once we get to that level, it's a lot of the stuff like we talked about with Susie. And the challenge of golf is our humanness and being trapped or distracted or caught in things like habit loops, old belief systems, stories. If you've, I'm 66 years old. I'm in my 7th decade. There's certain ways of being in the world that I've just followed for, like I say, close to 7 decades. And they operate on belief systems, on things that have happened to me and strategies that I have unconsciously formed as a child, how I'm going to go through the world. And part of transforming, if you will, is overcoming all those things, those strategies that keep me stuck. The visceral hit that I take with certain things go on. That's the hard part. I sent this guy an email. I said, this is doable, but I said, this is going to excite you, challenge you, torment you, depress you.
Yeah.
All of that, because it's the behaviors that get us caught. We can do those things that you talked about, practice short game better, increase your speed, be more flexible. Those things are doable if you commit and you're able to follow through on your commitments. But coming back to Susie, it's having the awareness of of how our sort of our old ways of being keep us stuck is one of the greatest challenges you have in this game.
Absolutely.
And in life.
Well, and you used a great word there, and I was going to bring it up because I'd heard this phrase recently, and I've been using it a lot. There's a big difference between being interested in getting good and being committed to being good. Because if this guy who's an 8 handicap and wants to be a 2 in a couple of years, like that is a big commitment.
Oh,
like it's huge. And I'm going to tell you, 8 to 4 is not an easy thing. 4 to 2 is impossible, and 2 to scratch is like, again, quit your job. But if you're not committed, if you're just sort of interested in it, then you won't overcome all the challenges, as you've so aptly put, all the emotional and physical ups and downs of the next couple of years. It would be interesting to see, and maybe you could update us from time to time as to how he's doing, because I think it's a fascinating quest, because I think a lot of people who listen to this show and watch YouTube videos and listen to other podcasts, they're interested in getting better. But I think a smaller percentage are committed to getting better.
Yeah. Well, interesting. So thanks for bringing up that email. It's been an interesting response. It's interesting responses I've got to that email. So I sent the same question out to a bunch of coach friends of mine, some people who are really good players like you. And so one of those people was Todd Graves, who is the co-founder of Graves Golf Academy. They teach the single plane swing that he learned from Mo Norman. And one of the things I ran by him around, okay, if you want to be to scratch, and I ran by him my experience with you. And I said, well, Howard, Howard was a plus a good portion of last year. He's been a scratch for a number of years. And I said, Howard has a golf club in his hand pretty well from May 1st to October 31st. And he plays a ton of golf. And I think that's what it takes to play at that level. And he just went 1000%. You've got to play a lot of golf. He said, you've got to play a minimum of 3 days a week. You've got to have dedicated, scheduled practice time where you're committed that this time is sacred in my calendar. Nothing is going to get in the way of this. And so the key point that he was making is that if you really are committed to getting, quote, better at something like that, then you got to know what the investment you've got to make in yourself to do that.
Another great word. And by the way, not to correct you, but to make it clear, I have a golf club in my hand every day of the year.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
No, I'm serious.
I get it. I totally get it.
There's only a few days in the year, especially now that I'm going away in the winter, but even when I didn't, like I take that dog of mine out every day. And on most days, even except for the blizzard days, on those days I have a golf club in my hand in Golf Lab. But on those, on a decent day in the winter, I'm hitting balls in the little park with Stan and chipping little.
Yeah, but what about Christmas Day when the kids are all at home and everyone's gathered around the Christmas tree and.
Okay, on those days, I definitely walk by the mirror in Golf Lab just to check my setup. Anyway, but good. Listen, I think it'll be fascinating to follow this gentleman's progress. Not saying maybe it's not a gentleman, maybe it's a woman. Women can be scratch golfers too, Tim. Well, it'll be interesting to follow this person's progress, and I think it would be also fascinating maybe to see what other people have said about it because. I said.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been really fascinating, but just quickly, one of the things that is pretty well common among all the responses is find out where you're losing shots. Find out where you're making mistakes, such as target selection, club selection off the tee, just, keeping stats. Where, where are you? Where are you leaving shots out there? And if you start to address that stuff, you start to chip away.
Well, at 8 handicap, you're still making way too many. It's the decade 5. I guarantee you that 8 handicap has more penalty shots, more 3 putts, more 2 chips, all that stuff. And that is all part of the strategy package. Somebody asked me the other day if I was still doing decade. And I said, well, I do decade now. Almost as part of the way it's the way I look at a golf course. I was in trouble the other day playing this tournament. And, I had a long shot to a green I was unfamiliar with. It was 200 plus yards. And all I said to myself was where I'm going to leave this golf ball. Cause I was 205 to the green on its tough, long par 4. I said, there was trouble right. And I just thought to myself, wherever this ball goes, it's not going right. It may not go on the green because from 205, my number of shots from a perfect lie onto the green are still pretty short. So I knew I was going to probably miss the green. And so where I wanted to miss it was to make the worst I could make was a bogey. And sure enough, I did. I hit a really good shot straight left of the green. I thought maybe if it cuts, I'll get on the green. It didn't. It just went straight. I pitched up to about 6 or 7 feet, just missed the putt, tapped in for bogey. Thank you very much. What I didn't do, and what a lot of 8 plus handicaps would do, is I didn't try and hit it on the green.
Yep.
I thought if it got on the green, if my dispersion, if I pushed it slightly and it got on the green, good for me. But if I hit it nicely, which I did, it just went where I aimed it, which was left. Yeah. And that's big. That's how I still do decade.
Yeah, well, that's takes experience to know that. I mean, it just, again, it's kind of counterintuitive. I'm here, I got the shot. Oh, maybe I could hit this hybrid on the green or my 5 wood. But if you really look at the stats about even how tour players, from 205 yards, man, their dispersion is all over the place. You're just better to knock it up there away from the trouble, leave it short, chip on, and every once in a while you make a putt. The worst you're going to make is a bogey if you're kind of a 8-ish handicap, like you said.
I saw a stat from Lou Stagner yesterday at some point. I thought it was interesting to repeat that a scratch golfer at 125 yards from the fairway has a 10% chance of making a birdie and a 19% chance of making a bogey. So now do the math for 5, 10, 15, and 20 handicap players.
Yeah.
So if I'm more likely to make bogey than I am birdie. It doesn't now. bogey versus par is different. They're just talking about his stat was birdie versus bogey. I'm more likely to bogey that than I am to birdie it, based on the number of bogeys that I would make to birdies. So there's a great example of, so where I was the other day at 205 from the green, I had just a good enough lie in the rough to hit that shot. If my lie was any worse, I would have laid up. I would have hit a 7-iron, whatever, 40 yards short of the green, pitched it up, took my bogey, because in a tournament, especially a qualifier, which I was in, the worst you've got to make is a bogey. Or if you're a higher handicap, the worst you can make is a double. It's when you start making, we've all done it, making triples and quads. It's no good.
There you go. More wisdom from GSL.
So should I listen? I know I've talked a lot. Should I tell the story about getting there a minute before my tee time?
Oh, please do tell. Love it. Love it. Love it.
At a qualifier, just quickly, I qualified last week with Charlie Fitzsimmons, and I qualified for the Ontario Better Ball. I had my lowest round of the year and my lowest competitive round of the year with Charlie. Shot 72 on a grown-up golf course, 6,700 yards. It was great. I've been playing pretty well lately, and it's not just that I've been playing well, but for the last couple of months, I've enjoyed golf more than I've ever done. So I go to this tournament. This is for the senior Better Ball. It's a 2-man event, and I'm an hour and 15 minutes away from where I'm going, and I get on the 401, and they shut it down. And it took me 2 hours and 45 minutes to get there. I got there at 1 minute before my tee time, and because of the traffic, they literally shut all the lanes of the busiest highway in Canada down.
Whoa.
So I let my partner Jamie know that, hey, I'm going to get there, but let them know I'm going to be, because if you're in a GAO event, if you're not on the tee at your time, you're disqualified. But in a 2-man event, if one of you is there to tee off, you can play. So I said, you might have to play the first hole by yourself. So they pushed our times back 10 minutes. So I got to the first tee. Someone gave me a ride from the parking lot. I took about 10 swings with my 6 and 7-iron, 2 clubs together, and teed it up. Hadn't hit a ball, hadn't putted, hadn't warmed up, hadn't stretched really. And then I went out and shot my lowest competitive round of the year. I shot 1 under par 70. Now, why did I do that?
Lessons and morals, please.
Well, very, very simple. I think, as I said to you, I think if I had to guess, I think I'm beginning to believe and develop some serious confidence, stable confidence that no matter what's happening, I'm going to be okay. Like, I knew that I'd be all right, and that Jamie's a good player. He could carry us for a couple holes, that we'd be fine, that even if it didn't work out, it was going to be fine. And even my first swing of the day with a golf ball, I hit it pretty good. I didn't crush it, but I kept it in play, and I hit 8 of the first 9 greens in regulation and shot 1 under on the front. And I just think that's what it is. Even though I was rushing, and even though I was, worried that we would miss our tee time, I just had this feeling like, I'll probably be all right. And our team was 5 under as a team. Jamie made a couple nice birdies on the back 9, and we got in easily. And yeah, it was just weird. It was weird. It was almost like what she said about blacking out. Like, I never really thought much all day. All I did was, what I've been doing lately is I'm trying to swing as freely as I can, and I hit a lot of greens in regulation and made some really good putts. But that's the other thing. I've started putting better now because
great.
I've just started letting it go. I made 4 birdies, and they weren't tap-ins. They were of length, 15, 12 feet. Anyway, there you go. So that's
I love that. I love that story. Thank you for sharing it. What it makes me think about is that you knew, maybe at even an unconscious level, like, you're going to be fine no matter what happens. You got there. I'm playing golf today. I mean, how bad can it be? I'm playing golf. I'm going to be with my buddy, and I'm going to play golf, and I'm going to be okay. Maybe even just at an unconscious level. But what you made me think about was just, in so many ways, as golfers, and particularly golfers, I think, who live in North America, as Susie was saying, we have all these shoulds. We get to the golf. We need to get to if you're a serious competitive golfer, you should get to the golf course an hour early. You should do your warm up, get flexible, make sure you got all your snacks and your hydration. You should hit balls. You should do this, and this. contrast that to say Ireland or Scotland, where you pull into like this 9-hole golf course, gravel parking lot. They swing their feet out of the car, put their shoes on, grab the clubs out of the boot, go to the first tee, maybe take a couple of swings and
That's
go.
right. Yeah.
And most of those people have a lovely time and they play pretty well because I just love the relationship they have to the game. Usually match play, quite often. Maybe I think that's overplayed somewhat, but it's about having there's just a more relaxed relationship with the game. And,
yeah, I agree.
And people play well. I mean, last year I was playing often on Wednesdays at Blue Springs. First guy off the tee to bolt around in a cart in 2 hours, 15 minutes. I never warmed up. I just got there, went straight to the tee, bang. And quite often I played really well.
No, I love what you said about the shoulds of it. I mean, I'm a serious tournament player. That's how I see myself, or I've seen myself. I've got to do all that stuff. And when I grew up in Moose Jaw, there was no driving range. There was no driving range until, way after I'd left home. I'd never been in a golf course where you could go to the range before the round. There was a putting green in Moose Jaw, and maybe part of me thinks there was a net somewhere. But that's why a lot of these old golf courses like Islington and Toronto Golf and, even Georgetown over there, which is a club link course now, they didn't have a range. They had a net near the first tee. You'd hit a few swings. So, I think I've told you this story before. The first time I played a tournament with Charlie, it was the first time we're going to qualify for the Better Bowl. And now we've been doing this. I was trying to think, this is probably our 5th or 6th time. And I didn't know Charlie very well, and I just thought of him as this high-level, Canadian university legend. And I got to the course, as you say, got there and stretched and all this other stuff. And Charlie kind of rocks up about half an hour before our tee time, stretched a little bit. I think he hit 1 or 2 balls and then went to the tee.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is going on? And as he said, listen, I'm more interested in getting my body ready to play. I know how to play. And I'm not saying I'm going to start arriving at my tee times, but I'm going to put a lot less, worry. Not that I've been worried, but a lot less whatever on making sure I hit balls for.
Well, less shoulds that you should do this and should do that. Yeah.
100%.
I watched Charlie do that when he was playing for Western as the oldest Canadian university golfer. You'd see all these kids so studiously working their game on the range, with the alignment 6 down, and that's all good stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. But he would come over and just kind of wriggle around a bit, like our favorite Spanish golfer on the Champions Tour.
Oh yeah. What's his name?
Yeah, of course. Here we are.
Angel Jimenez. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Watch him wriggle around a bit, and then come over to the first tee, few jokes. And then bang, off he goes.
Yeah.
Just
I'll say this
more
about
relaxed approach to golf.
I played like the round I played 2 days ago in this event where I got there on my tee time. I hit it pretty well. I know it's going to sound crazy, but I shot under par. I didn't drive it great. I drove it okay. I never drove it really in trouble, but I played pretty nicely. But with Charlie, that's as good as I can hit a golf ball. And I think I'm not sure if I told you this, but nobody was happier for me because Charlie, listen, the truth is Charlie usually, like last year's the first year that I've ever been in a qualifier with him for this, where I felt like I contributed, because the other few years Charlie shot 4 or 5 under and that was our score. But this year I made 3 birdies in the first 8 holes before Charlie made a birdie. So what I was telling you about Charlie is nobody was nobody was happier for how I was playing than Charlie Fitzsimmons. Like that's a great quality in a partner.
Totally.
And he said something to me on 17. Was 17? 17 was I'm playing with these kids. So it's like 190, par 3, wind is screaming hard right to left. And I just hit this beautiful iron right to left into the wind, hit it about 10 feet. But when it was in the air, Charlie yelled, "You're golfing like an angel." And I fell down laughing because
that is awesome.
It was so funny to me You're golfing like an angel, he said. And I looked at him. I just couldn't stop. I said, okay, dude, I get it. I know. But it was just, I'm telling you. And he didn't, he played okay for him. I don't know, whatever he shot, 72, 73. But he was so happy for me, he couldn't contain himself. I'll tell you what, I'm finished by saying this. We talked about it yesterday. I think the reason he was happy for me is because he's been with me when I've struggled, when I just can't pull the trigger, when I can't, all I do is guide it around. Like a lot of times I'd play with him, I'd be going into the tournament and I'd be so intimidated by the circumstances that I just smother hook everything. And then I've sort of to evolve to the point where I can, finally actually let the ball go. That's why he yelled that. It just made me laugh. And again, that's a really good partner because he wasn't having his best day, but he saw me having a very good day. And he was very happy for me, which was cool.
That's awesome. But you're golfing like an angel. Where have you ever heard that before?
I've never heard that. I've been playing forever. I've never heard anybody say that.
Exactly.
Like an angel. Okay, are we done? Do you have anything else?
I think that we've covered most everything I wanted to get to. Yep.
Okay. Let's keep up. Let's keep in touch with that guy and see how like next year that could be one of our little projects to see how the 8 handicap goes to a 4. See if you can do it.
Yeah, and let's keep in contact with Susie Meyers. Great to have her back someday.
Yeah, she's very good. Good chatter. Golf from point A. Control your thoughts and you control your thoughts and your thoughts control everything. So there you go. We'll be back in a couple weeks. Just hang around a second. I want to throw a couple dates at you.
Okay.
As always, thanks to Taylormade Golf, who is OscarBravo.com, and StretchLab Toronto. O'ConnorGolf.ca is where you catch up with all things Tim, the Substack. It's called Up and Down. Is it not called Up and Down?
It is called Up and Down.
All right. And check out humbleandfredradio.com. Till next time.
Sound of the river, you stop and you hold everything.